The grandfather clock in the hall struck 5, its deep chimes reverberating through the silent mansion. Eloise Jackson's eyes opened before her alarm could sound. 20 years of rising with the sun had programmed her body better than any device. She swung her legs over the edge of her modest bed in the servants' quarters, her fingers automatically reaching for the small silver locket on the nightstand, the only inheritance from her grandmother. "Another day," she whispered to herself, clasping the locket around her neck. Outside her window, the first hints of dawn painted the sprawling estate in hues of lavender and gold. The Harrison estate stood like a monument to success on the outskirts of Boston. 10 acres of manicured gardens surrounding a colonial-style mansion, with modern additions that spoke of both old money and new innovation. It was a fortress of privilege that Eloise entered each day, but never truly belonged to. She moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower, dress, pin her thick coils into a neat bun. At 42, Eloise's face carried the gentle lines of someone who smiled often, despite life's hardships. Her dark skin glowed with a quiet dignity that no uniform could diminish. By 5:30, she was in the kitchen, brewing coffee she wouldn't drink, but knew would be demanded the moment Mr. Patterson, the house manager, arrived. The kitchen gleamed with marble countertops and state-of-the-art appliances that probably cost more than her entire childhood home in South Carolina. "Morning, Ms. Jackson." Patterson's voice cut through the kitchen's silence. He appeared in the doorway, immaculate as always in his tailored suit, tablet in hand. At 65, he moved with the precision of someone who had spent his life ensuring other people's worlds ran smoothly. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson." Eloise poured him the coffee she had waiting. "Are the children's schedules the same today?" Patterson swiped through his tablet. "Emma has ballet at 4. Oliver has his tutor coming for advanced mathematics at 3. He paused, looking up. "And Mr. Harrison's sister is arriving for dinner tonight. He's requested the children be present, properly dressed." Eloise nodded, mentally adjusting her day. Emma at 7 would need help with her hair before ballet. Oliver, 9, would need encouragement to sit through his tutoring session. The boy was brilliant but restless. "Will Mr. Harrison be home for dinner then?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Patterson's expression remained impassive. "He's flying in from Tokyo specifically for this dinner. He'll arrive by 6. A rare appearance. Alexander Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global Innovations, was more myth than man in his own home. In the 5 years Eloise had worked at the estate, she could count on one hand the number of times she'd been in the same room as him. "I understand," she said, though a familiar weight settled in her chest. The children would be both excited and nervous. Their father was practically a stranger to them, his presence marked only by expensive gifts that arrived on birthdays and holidays. As Patterson left, Eloise moved through the morning rhythm that had become her life. She prepared breakfast trays for the children, choosing fresh strawberries for Emma and adding extra protein for Oliver, who was going through a growth spurt. The nutritionist had left detailed instructions, but Eloise had learned to add small touches that made the meals less clinical. A smiley face made of blueberries, pancakes cut into dinosaur shapes. At precisely 7, she ascended the grand staircase to the children's wing. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the groundskeeper's equipment outside. Sometimes in these early morning moments, Eloise felt like she was the only real person in a beautiful museum. She knocked gently on Emma's door first. "Good morning, sunshine," she called softly. "Time to rise and shine." A muffled groan answered her, followed by the rustle of sheets. Eloise entered the room, a fairy tale paradise of soft pinks and creams, with a canopy bed that could have housed a princess. Emma's dark curls peeked out from beneath the covers, her face still soft with sleep. "5 more minutes, Ellie," the little girl mumbled, using the nickname only she was allowed. "Those same 5 minutes you asked for yesterday?" Eloise smiled, setting down the breakfast tray and moving to the windows to draw back the heavy curtains. Sunlight flooded the room, illuminating the collection of dolls and books that lined custom-built shelves. "Is Daddy coming today?" Emma asked, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. The question, innocent but loaded, made Eloise's heart twist. "Yes, sweetheart. For dinner with Aunt Catherine." She smoothed Emma's wild curls, so similar to what her own had been at that age. "And you have ballet this afternoon, so we need to get an early start." Emma's face lit up at the mention of ballet, her father temporarily forgotten. Eloise helped her with her breakfast, listening as the little girl chattered about her dance routine and the upcoming recital. Next came Oliver's room, a stark contrast to his sister's, with walls covered in scientific charts, model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, and books stacked in precarious towers beside his bed. Unlike Emma, Oliver was already awake, cross-legged on his bed with a large book open in front of him. "Good morning, Professor," Eloise greeted him, using the nickname that never failed to make him smile. "Learning something new already?" Oliver looked up, his hazel eyes, so much like his absent father's, bright with excitement. "Did you know that some octopuses have blue blood? It's because they use copper instead of iron to transport oxygen." "I did not know that," Eloise said, genuinely impressed as she set down his breakfast tray. "But I do know that even brilliant scientists need a good breakfast." Oliver closed his book reluctantly. At 9, he already showed the analytical mind and focused intensity that had made his father a business legend. But unlike Alexander Harrison, Oliver had a warmth to him, a curiosity about people as well as facts. "Is he really coming tonight?" Oliver asked suddenly, his voice carefully controlled as he picked up his fork. Eloise sat on the edge of his bed. "Yes, he is, and he'll be very proud to hear about your science fair project." Oliver nodded, but Eloise could see the doubt in his eyes, the unspoken question of whether his father would actually care or even ask. As she helped the children prepare for their day, supervising teeth brushing, selecting appropriate clothing, checking backpacks for homework, Eloise found herself wondering, as she often did, about Alexander Harrison. The man was a mystery wrapped in headlines and business journals. His face appeared on magazine covers and television interviews, yet his own children barely knew him. After the children had been picked up by their private tutor for morning lessons, Eloise began her cleaning routine. The mansion required constant attention, though a cleaning service came twice weekly for the heavy work. Her domain was more personal: the children's rooms, their playroom, the kitchen, and the family living areas. She moved through these spaces like a guardian, not just cleaning but preserving the small signs of actual life in a house that often felt more like a showpiece than a home. In Emma's room, she straightened the collection of stuffed animals, knowing exactly how they should be arranged. In Oliver's, she was careful not to disturb his elaborate notes and diagrams, dusting around them with practiced precision. As she worked, Eloise hummed softly, old gospel songs her mother had taught her, pieces of herself that she carried into this world so different from the one she'd grown up in. When she reached the family room, a space rarely used when the children weren't home, she paused to straighten the photographs on the mantel. Most were professionally taken, perfect images of perfect-looking children at various ages, but there were a few candid shots that she herself had taken. Emma mid-laugh on the garden swing, Oliver focused intently on building a complex Lego structure. What caught her attention today, however, was a photograph she'd never seen before. It showed Alexander Harrison, not in his usual power suit but in casual clothes, with a woman Eloise didn't recognize. They were younger, smiling, the woman cradling a newborn that must have been Oliver. Behind the frame was a shadow of dust, suggesting the photo had been recently placed there after being stored away for years. A voice from the doorway made her jump. "Miss Jackson." Eloise turned quickly, her heart racing. Mr. Patterson stood watching her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, Mr. Patterson. I've just received word that Mr. Harrison will be bringing additional guests tonight. The dinner will now be for 8 rather than 4. She nodded, trying to compose herself. "I'll adjust the children's schedule to ensure they're ready." Patterson hesitated, which was unusual for him. "There's something else. One of the guests is Mrs. Vivian Harrison." Eloise felt the air leave her lungs. Vivian Harrison, the children's mother. A woman who had left when Emma was barely 2, whose name was never spoken in this house, who had chosen a life of European luxury over her own children. "I see," she managed, though her mind was racing. In 5 years, Vivian Harrison had never once returned to the estate, never called on birthdays, never sent so much as a letter. "The children don't know," Patterson added, his voice lowering slightly. "Mr. Harrison plans to inform them himself when he arrives." Eloise felt a surge of protective anger. How dare they spring this on Oliver and Emma with no preparation? How could they not understand what this would do to them? But she kept her face neutral, years of practice helping her hide her true feelings. "Thank you for letting me know," she said evenly. After Patterson left, Eloise stood in the silent room, her hand absently touching the locket at her throat. The children would be devastated, confused, hopeful, a dangerous combination. She thought of Emma, who sometimes still cried at night for a mother she barely remembered, of Oliver, who pretended he didn't care, but kept a small, worn photograph hidden in his science book. The security camera in the corner of the room blinked its red light, a constant reminder that in this house someone was always watching. What the cameras couldn't see, however, was the resolve forming in Eloise's heart. These children, these beautiful, brilliant, neglected children, deserved protection. They deserved preparation. They deserved truth delivered with kindness. As she resumed her cleaning, Eloise began planning. She couldn't directly disobey Mr. Harrison's wishes, but she could arm Oliver and Emma with the emotional strength they would need tonight. She could be there for them in the aftermath, whatever that might be. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that at that very moment in his private jet somewhere over the Pacific, Alexander Harrison was watching her through his secure feed. He observed her careful straightening of his children's belongings, saw the gentle way she touched the photograph, noticed the conflict that crossed her face at Patterson's news. For 5 years, Alexander had watched Eloise Jackson through the distance of security cameras and staff reports. He had seen her reading to his children when nightmares struck, teaching Emma to braid her curly hair with patience no tutor had ever shown, sitting with Oliver for hours as the boy worked through complex problems. He had watched her give his children what he never had: consistent love, unwavering presence, the courage to be themselves. And tonight, as his carefully constructed world threatened to unravel with his ex-wife's sudden reappearance, Alexander Harrison found himself relying on the one person in his household he had never actually spoken to, the maid who had become more of a parent to his children than he had ever been. What Eloise couldn't see, as she moved through the mansion preparing for the evening's emotional storm, was that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The security camera continued to blink, recording her movements, transmitting them to a man who was finally beginning to understand what he had been missing all along. The grandfather clock struck noon, marking the halfway point of a day that would ultimately divide Eloise's life into before and after. Outside, clouds began to gather over the Harrison estate, a fitting backdrop for the approaching tempest that neither wealth nor power could control. The afternoon brought a shift in the air. Not just the approaching storm clouds, but a tension that seemed to seep through the mansion's marble floors and pristine walls. Eloise felt it as she prepared the children's after-school snacks, her movements automatic while her mind worked through how to prepare Oliver and Emma for tonight's shock. At 2:30, the sleek black SUV pulled into the circular driveway, delivering the children from their private school. Eloise watched from the kitchen window as they emerged. Oliver first, his backpack nearly as big as he was, followed by Emma, her uniform skirt twirling as she spun to show Patterson something in her hand. "Ellie! Ellie!" Emma's voice echoed through the foyer moments later. "Look what I made in art class." The little girl burst into the kitchen, still in her Navy uniform, holding out a clay sculpture that vaguely resembled a bird. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Eloise smiled, carefully taking the misshapen creation. "Is it a blue jay?" Emma beamed. "Yes, like the ones we watch in the garden. Mrs. Powell said I have artistic vision." "She's absolutely right," Eloise said, placing the sculpture on the counter with ceremonial care. "We should find a special place to display it." Oliver entered more slowly, his expression serious as he dropped his backpack on a chair. "Mr. Harris gave back our science papers," he said, pulling out a folder. "I got the highest score." "Of course you did, Professor." Eloise winked, sliding his favorite snack, apple slices with peanut butter, across the counter. Was there ever any doubt? A small smile broke through his serious facade. He said my analysis of environmental factors was remarkably sophisticated. "Well, I'd expect nothing less from someone who taught me about blue-blooded octopuses this morning," Eloise replied, watching as the compliment made him stand a little taller. As the children ate, Eloise moved around the kitchen, tidying and preparing, all while formulating her approach. Patterson had made it clear that Mr. Harrison wanted to tell the children himself about their mother's return, but she could at least prepare the ground. "So," she said casually, "your father will be home for dinner tonight." Emma nearly choked on her juice. "Really? He's actually coming?" Oliver's response was more measured, but Eloise caught the hopeful flicker in his eyes. "Is it just for Aunt Catherine's visit?" "There will be a few guests," Eloise said carefully. "It's going to be quite an important dinner." "Do I need to wear a tie?" Oliver asked with the resignation of someone facing an unpleasant but inevitable fate. Eloise laughed softly. "Yes, I'm afraid so. And Emma, we'll need to find your navy velvet dress." Emma groaned dramatically before perking up. "Will you do my hair in those fancy braids like last Christmas? Daddy said I looked like a princess." The mention of her father's rare compliment made Emma's eyes shine, and Eloise felt a familiar ache. These children were so starved for their father's attention, that even the smallest crumbs sustained them for months. "Of course I will," she promised. "Now, Oliver, don't forget your tutor will be here at 3 for math." While Oliver worked with his tutor in the study and Emma attended her ballet lesson in the mansion's private studio, Eloise prepared for the evening ahead. She laid out their formal clothes, checked in with the chef about the dinner menu, and made sure the rarely used formal dining room was being properly arranged. But her mind kept returning to the photograph she'd seen in the family room. Alexander Harrison with his wife and newborn son. The woman had been beautiful, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from generations of privilege. She had left her children behind for reasons no one ever discussed, and now she was returning without warning. At 5:30, with the sky darkening both from the setting sun and the approaching storm, Eloise helped Emma out of her ballet clothes and into a bath scented with lavender. "Ellie," Emma said as Eloise gently shampooed her curls, "do you think Daddy will stay longer this time?" The innocent question pierced Eloise's heart. "I'm not sure, Sunshine. Your father is a very busy man." "Too busy for us," Emma said with a child's blunt honesty. Eloise paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes adults have complicated lives, Emma. It doesn't mean they don't love you. But you're always here," the little girl pointed out. "And you love us." "Yes," Eloise acknowledged, her throat tight. "I do love you. Very much." After the bath, Eloise sat Emma on a cushioned stool and began the process of styling her hair. The little girl's curls were similar to her own, and Eloise took special pride in teaching Emma to love her hair rather than fight it, something her own mother had instilled in her. "Emma," she said gently as she worked, "I want to tell you something important." "What is it?" Emma asked, trying to turn her head. "Stay still, sweetheart," Eloise guided her back. "Sometimes in life we get surprises. Some good, some different. And when those surprises come, it's okay to have big feelings about them." Emma's brow furrowed in the mirror. "What kind of surprise? Is it about tonight?" Eloise met the child's eyes in the reflection. "I don't know exactly what will happen tonight, but whatever it is, I want you to remember that you are strong and loved, and that I'm here for you, always." "You're being weird, Ellie," Emma giggled, but Eloise could see her words had registered somewhere in the child's mind. In Oliver's room, a similar conversation unfolded as Eloise helped him with his tie, a task he could probably manage himself, but still allowed her to do. "I heard Patterson on the phone," Oliver said suddenly. "He was talking about flight arrangements for someone important." Eloise's hand stilled momentarily before continuing to adjust his collar. "Your father has important business associates." "It's her, isn't it?" Oliver's voice was quiet, but certain. "My mother." Eloise looked down into his searching eyes. Too perceptive, too old for his 9 years. "Oliver, You don't have to say it," he cut her off. "I can tell by your face." She knelt down to his level, her hands on his shoulders. "Your father wants to speak with you and Emma about tonight's guests. It's not my place to." "Why is she coming back now?" The hurt in his voice was palpable. "She didn't want us before." Eloise pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders tense before gradually relaxing into her embrace. "I don't know all the answers, Professor, but I know that you deserve every happiness in this world. And whatever happens tonight, remember that some people aren't good at loving others the way they should be loved. That's their failing, not yours." Oliver pulled back, his young face set with determination. "I need to protect Emma. She doesn't remember how Mom left. I do." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Eloise's chest tighten. "You're a wonderful brother, Oliver. But you don't have to carry everything alone, that's what I'm here for." She helped him finish dressing, noting how the formal clothes transformed him into a miniature version of his father, all except for the warmth in his eyes that was entirely his own. At 6:15, the sound of helicopter blades cut through the pattering of rain that had begun to fall. Mr. Harrison rarely drove from the airport, preferring the efficiency of his private helicopter that could land directly on the estate's helipad. "He's here," Oliver said, moving to the window to watch the sleek black helicopter descend. "Let's go find Emma," Eloise suggested, knowing the children would want to greet their father together. Strength in numbers against the unpredictability of his attention. They found Emma twirling in front of her full-length mirror, admiring how her navy velvet dress flared out. Her hair was arranged in the intricate braided crown Eloise had promised, making her look older than her 7 years. "You look beautiful, Em," Oliver said, his earlier tension momentarily forgotten in his affection for his sister. "So do you," Emma replied, reaching out to straighten his already perfect tie in imitation of how she'd seen Eloise do it. The sound of voices from downstairs signaled their father's arrival. Eloise saw both children take deep breaths, unconsciously preparing themselves. "Remember," she said softly, "I'll be right there in the dining room if you need anything." Although technically she wouldn't be seated at the table, she would be helping to serve and attending to the children's needs, moving between the kitchen and dining room like the ghost she sometimes felt herself to be in this house. They descended the grand staircase together, the children slightly ahead of her. In the foyer below, Alexander Harrison stood talking with Patterson, still in his travel coat, his back to them. He was tall and imposing even from behind, his presence filling the space in a way that seemed to compress the air. "Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out, her excitement overtaking her practiced decorum. Alexander turned, and Eloise saw what few others ever witnessed, the brief, genuine smile that transformed his usually stern face. For a flickering moment, the powerful CEO disappeared, replaced by a father seeing his children. "Emma, Oliver." His voice carried the crisp authority he was known for, but softened slightly at the edges. "You both look very proper this evening." Emma rushed forward for a hug, which he provided somewhat stiffly before setting her back. Oliver approached more cautiously, accepting his father's firm handshake. "Sir." Oliver nodded formally, and something like sadness passed over Alexander's face so quickly Eloise nearly missed it. It was then that Alexander's eyes lifted, meeting Eloise's for the first time in the 5 years she had worked in his home. The moment stretched, electric and uncomfortable, as she suddenly realized he was actually seeing her, not looking through her as he usually did with household staff. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his deep voice pronouncing her name with a strange familiarity. "Mr. Harrison," she replied evenly, surprised he even knew her name. "Welcome home." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes before Patterson stepped forward with practiced timing. "Sir, your guests will be arriving shortly. Perhaps you'd like to freshen up before they arrive?" Alexander nodded, his gaze lingering on Eloise for one more unsettling moment before he turned to the children. "I need to speak with both of you before dinner. Come to my study in 15 minutes. As he strode away, Emma looked up at Eloise with confusion. "Daddy knew your name." "Of course he does, silly," Oliver said. "He pays her." But Eloise was equally puzzled. Alexander Harrison had never directly addressed her before. Their paths rarely crossed, and when they did, he treated her with the same benign invisibility that the wealthy often bestowed upon those who served them. "Run along now," she urged the children. "You heard your father. 15 minutes. While the children waited nervously outside their father's study, Eloise returned to the kitchen where the staff was in carefully choreographed chaos preparing for the dinner. Chef Michel barked orders at his assistants while Patterson oversaw the final touches to the dining room. "Ms. Jackson," Patterson approached her with a lowered voice. A word. He led her to the butler's pantry, a small room off the kitchen where they wouldn't be overheard. "There's been a change of plans. Mr. Harrison has requested that you dine with the family tonight." Eloise stared at him. "I'm sorry? You are to sit at the table, not serve," Patterson clarified, looking as confused by the instruction as she felt. "He specifically said the children would be more comfortable with your presence. But the other guests will have to accept his decision," Patterson finished firmly. "There's a dress in your size being delivered to your quarters. You have 30 minutes to change." Stunned, Eloise made her way to her room in the staff wing. True to Patterson's word, a garment bag lay across her bed. Inside was an elegant navy dress that looked like it cost more than she made in 3 months. As she changed, her mind raced. Why would Alexander Harrison suddenly want her at his table? In 5 years, he had barely acknowledged her existence, and now she was being dressed up like some sort of exhibition. The thought made her uncomfortable, but her concern for the children, about to face their long-absent mother, overrode her personal discomfort. The dress fit perfectly, which raised even more questions. How did he know her size? She twisted her hair into a simple but elegant knot, added her grandmother's locket, her one non-negotiable piece of herself, and took a deep breath. When she returned to the main house, she found Patterson waiting for her with an appraising eye. "The guests have arrived," he informed her. "The children are already in the drawing room with Mr. Harrison and Ms. Catherine." Eloise nodded, smoothing down the unfamiliar fabric of the expensive dress. "And Mrs. Harrison?" "Arrived separately. She's with them now." Patterson's usual impassivity slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of disapproval. "Ms. Jackson, whatever happens this evening, the children will need consistency afterward." It was the closest thing to personal concern she had ever heard from the formal house manager. "I understand," she replied softly. The drawing room doors loomed before her, the murmur of voices audible from within. Eloise hesitated, feeling suddenly, acutely out of place. She was about to turn away to tell Patterson there had been a mistake, when the doors opened. Alexander Harrison stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice carrying none of its usual clipped efficiency, "please join us." She had no choice but to step forward, into a room where her two worlds were about to collide. The drawing room was filled with people she had only ever glimpsed from a distance. Alexander's sister Catherine, known for her philanthropic work, an older couple who must be the Harrison parents, two men in expensive suits who screamed, "Business associates." And there, standing by the fireplace with a champagne flute in her manicured hand, was Vivian Harrison. She was even more beautiful than in the photograph, her blonde hair cut in a sleek bob, her figure slim and elegant in a designer dress. She looked expensive, cultivated, and completely out of place next to the children who shared her blood, but clearly not her priorities. Emma stood beside her father, her earlier excitement replaced by wide-eyed uncertainty, as she stared at the mother she barely remembered. Oliver stood slightly apart, his young face set in an expression Eloise recognized as his defense against hurt. "Everyone," Alexander's authoritative voice filled the room. "This is Eloise Jackson. She has been an invaluable part of our household and the children's lives." The introduction hung in the air, awkward and insufficient. Catherine Harrison recovered first, stepping forward with a warm smile. "Ms. Jackson, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you from my niece and nephew." Before Eloise could respond, Vivian Harrison's cool voice cut through the room. "The maid? Alexander, really?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Emma shrank back, instinctively moving closer to Eloise. Oliver's jaw tightened in a way that made him look years older. Alexander's face hardened as he looked at his ex-wife. "Eloise is joining us for dinner, Vivian. The children trust her, and given the unusual circumstances of this evening, I believe her presence will be beneficial." The way he emphasized unusual circumstances made it clear there was an underlying current to the evening that Eloise didn't fully understand. Vivian's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched higher. "How progressive of you." The older woman, Alexander's mother, Eloise assumed, stepped in smoothly. "Well, I for one am delighted to meet someone who has been so important to my grandchildren. Please, Ms. Jackson, tell me how my Emma is progressing with her piano lessons." The simple kindness broke the tension, allowing Eloise to find her footing in this unfamiliar territory. As she described Emma's musical progress, she felt Oliver's small hand slip into hers, squeezing with silent gratitude. Dinner was announced shortly after, and they processed into the formal dining room where the table gleamed with silver and crystal. Eloise found herself seated between Oliver and Emma, directly across from Alexander, a position that allowed her to keep watch over the children while unwillingly becoming the focus of their father's unreadable gaze. As the first course was served, Vivian directed her attention to her children, her voice honey-sweet. "Emma, darling, you've grown so much. And Oliver, your father tells me you're quite the little scientist." Oliver stared at his soup. "I'm in the top percentile for my age group in both mathematics and sciences," he recited mechanically. "Oliver builds robots," Emma added proudly. "And Ellie helps him when the parts get too fiddly for his fingers." Vivian's smile tightened at the mention of Eloise. "How hands-on of you, Ms. Jackson." "Eloise recognizes Oliver's potential," Alexander said unexpectedly. "She's been more attuned to both children's needs and talents than many of their highly credentialed instructors." The compliment, delivered in his matter-of-fact tone, stunned Eloise into silence. Across the table, Catherine Harrison watched the exchange with obvious interest. "Well," Vivian said, setting down her spoon with a delicate clink, "perhaps it's time we discussed why I've returned after all this time." The abrupt shift made even the business associates look uncomfortable. Emma froze beside Eloise, her small hand finding Eloise's under the table. "This isn't the time, Vivian," Alexander said sharply. "On the contrary," Vivian countered, her perfect smile never wavering. "Family dinner seems exactly the right time to discuss family matters. After all, I've come with a proposal that affects everyone at this table." The storm that had been threatening all day chose that moment to make its presence known, a crack of thunder punctuating Vivian's words. Rain lashed against the dining room windows, creating a dramatic backdrop for whatever revelation was about to unfold. Alexander's face had gone completely still, the muscle in his jaw the only indication of tension. "The children don't need to hear this now." "Hear what?" Oliver asked, his voice stronger than Eloise expected. "What's going on?" Vivian turned her perfect smile on her son. "Well, darling, I've decided it's time for me to be a proper mother to you both. I've come to take you back to Europe with me." The dining room froze in suspended animation. Emma's fork clattered against her plate, the sound amplified in the sudden silence. Across the table, Alexander's expression hardened into stone, while Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. The business associates exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Europe?" Emma's small voice broke the silence. Confusion etched across her features. Eloise felt Oliver stiffen beside her, his knuckles white around his water glass. She resisted the urge to pull both children into her arms, away from the emotional shrapnel exploding around them. "Yes, darling," Vivian continued smoothly, as if discussing nothing more consequential than a vacation. "I have a beautiful home in Switzerland now. There's a prestigious international school nearby, perfect for both of you. You'll love the mountains, the fresh air." "No." Oliver's voice was quiet but firm. Vivian's smile faltered slightly. "Pardon?" "No," he repeated, louder this time. "We're not going anywhere with you." Alexander cleared his throat, regaining control of the situation. "This discussion is inappropriate for dinner, especially with guests present." His gaze flickered meaningfully toward the business associates, who suddenly became very interested in their plates. "These guests are here precisely for this discussion," Vivian countered, gesturing to the men in suits. "Mr. Chen and Mr. Leibowitz are my attorneys. They're here to formalize the custody arrangement." A bolt of lightning illuminated the room, casting harsh shadows across the elegant table. In the brief flash, Eloise caught Alexander's expression, not anger, as she might have expected, but something closer to resignation. "Alexander?" his mother prompted, her aristocratic composure slipping for the first time. "Vivian has filed for full custody," he confirmed, his voice controlled but tight. "She's claiming that my work commitments make me an unfit parent." Emma began to cry silently, tears streaming down her face. Eloise instinctively pulled the little girl closer, feeling her tremble against her side. "That's not fair," Oliver burst out, suddenly looking every bit his 9 years rather than the miniature adult he often pretended to be. "You left us. You didn't want us." "Oliver," Alexander warned, but the boy was beyond hearing. "You never called, never visited, not one birthday, not one Christmas." Oliver's voice rose, years of hurt pouring out. "And now you want to take us away from our home? Away from Ellie?" Vivian's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Ellie, you mean the help? Really, Alexander, you've allowed the children to become inappropriately attached to the staff." "Ms. Jackson," Alexander corrected sharply, "has been the one constant presence in the children's lives. Something neither of us can claim." The self-recrimination in his voice was unexpected. Eloise looked up to find his gaze fixed on her face, an unfathomable emotion burning in his eyes. "This is precisely my point," Vivian pressed. "Our children are being raised by the hired help because you're too busy building your empire to be a father, whereas you've been too busy enjoying your alimony to be a mother." Catherine shot back, dropping all pretense of politeness. "Please stop," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. "Please don't fight." Alexander stood abruptly. "Emma, Oliver, you're excused from dinner, Ms. Jackson, would you please take them upstairs?" Relief flooded through Eloise at the chance to remove the children from this toxic situation. She stood, gently guiding Emma from her chair. "We're not finished here," Vivian objected. "The children are finished," Alexander stated with finality. "The adults will continue this discussion in private." Oliver hesitated, looking at his father with a mixture of confusion and betrayal. "Are you going to let her take us?" The question hung in the air like a live grenade. Alexander crossed to his son, kneeling to meet him at eye level, a gesture Eloise had never witnessed before. "No," he said simply, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "Never." Something passed between father and son, a fragile thread of understanding, tentative but real. Oliver nodded once, then took Eloise's outstretched hand. As they left the dining room, Eloise could hear the argument resuming behind them, voices rising to match the intensity of the storm outside. She guided the children up the grand staircase, away from the battlefield their home had become. In Emma's room, the little girl collapsed onto her bed, still in her velvet dress, sobs now coming in earnest. Oliver stood in the doorway, his face pale but composed. "Is it true?" Emma hiccuped through her tears. "Is Mommy going to take us away?" Eloise sat beside her, stroking her back in soothing circles. "Your father said no, and I believe him. But why does she want us now?" Emma asked. The heartbreaking question of a child who couldn't understand adult complexities. She didn't want us before. I think. Eloise chose her words carefully. I think sometimes adults make decisions based on what they need at the time. Your mother made choices years ago that hurt you both, and I'm so sorry for that. Why she's back now, I don't know for sure. Money, Oliver said flatly from the doorway. I heard Aunt Catherine at Christmas. Mom's new husband lost everything in some scandal. She's broke. Eloise looked up sharply. Oliver, we shouldn't assume. It's true, I looked him up online after I heard them talking. Philippe Deneuve, French banking scandal, assets frozen. Oliver recited the information with clinical detachment. The custody papers probably have financial terms. She wants Dad's money, not us. The calculated assessment was chilling coming from a 9-year-old. But Eloise knew Oliver's mind worked in ways far beyond his years. Regardless of why, she said firmly, what matters is that you're both safe and loved right here. Your father won't let anyone take you away. Emma looked up, her face tear-stained. But Dad's never here. How can he stop her if he's never here? The question struck at the heart of the problem. Alexander Harrison ruled his business world with absolute authority, but had delegated his most important responsibility, his children, to others, to her. I believe he'll find a way, Eloise said, praying she wasn't giving false hope. Now let's get you both ready for bed. It's been a difficult evening. As she helped Emma change into pajamas, the storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows like nature's own protest. Oliver disappeared briefly to his room, returning in his own pajamas, a thick book tucked under his arm. I'm staying with Emma tonight, he announced, his tone brooking no argument. She gets scared during storms. Eloise nodded, understanding his need to protect his sister, to exert control in a situation where he felt powerless. She helped them build a makeshift fort with Emma's blankets, something she normally reserved for special occasions, and tucked them both inside with stuffed animals and books. I'll stay until you fall asleep, she promised, settling on the edge of the bed. Ellie? Emma's voice came small and uncertain from within the fort. If we have to go away, would you come with us? The innocent question caught Eloise off guard, her throat tightening with emotion. Oh, sweetheart, she can't, Oliver answered for her. Mom would never allow it. Then I won't go, Emma declared with a 7-year-old's simple logic. I'll hide in your room, Ellie, they won't find me there. Eloise fought back tears. Let's not worry about that tonight. Your father promised he wouldn't let anyone take you away, remember? She began to sing softly, an old lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child. The familiar melody seemed to soothe the children, Emma's eyelids growing heavy despite the drama of the evening. As the children drifted toward sleep, Eloise heard raised voices from downstairs, punctuated by the occasional crash of thunder. The storm inside matched the one outside, forces of nature colliding with human will. Eventually, the voices faded, replaced by the sound of car doors slamming and engines starting. The guests were leaving, including presumably Vivian and her lawyers. Eloise remained with the sleeping children, reluctant to leave them alone after such an emotional evening. A soft knock on the bedroom door startled her. When she opened it, she found Alexander Harrison standing in the hallway. His tie loosened, his expression weary in a way she had never seen before. How are they? He asked quietly. Asleep, finally, she replied, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door partially closed behind her. It was a lot for them to process. He nodded, running a hand through his usually perfect hair. I need to speak with you, Ms. Jackson, in my office if you don't mind. The formal request was delivered without his usual commanding tone, almost like an actual request rather than an order. Eloise glanced back at the sleeping children, hesitant to leave them. They'll be fine, he assured her, correctly interpreting her concern. This won't take long. She followed him down the hallway to his rarely used home office. Unlike the sleek modern space at Harrison Global Innovations headquarters, this room was all old-world elegance. Leather-bound books, a massive mahogany desk, and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, currently streaked with rain. Please sit. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Eloise perched on the edge of the seat, acutely aware that she was still wearing the designer dress she'd been provided for dinner. Alexander didn't sit behind his desk as she expected, but took the chair beside hers, turning to face her directly. First, I want to apologize for what happened at dinner, he began, surprising her. Vivian's announcement was, not how I intended the children to learn about the situation. They're confused and frightened, Eloise said honestly. Especially Emma. Yes, he acknowledged, looking genuinely pained. Oliver seems to have figured out Vivian's motivations. He's very perceptive, like his mother, unfortunately, Alexander said with a hint of bitterness, but with a heart she never possessed. He paused, studying Eloise's face. A heart I believe he's developed largely thanks to you, Ms. Jackson. Uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, Eloise shifted in her seat. Mr. Harrison, what exactly did you want to discuss? He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I need your help, Ms. Jackson. More specifically, I need you to testify on my behalf in the custody hearing. Testify? She echoed, caught off guard. Yes, you've been the primary caregiver for my children for 5 years. Your testimony about their well-being, their routines, their development under the current arrangement would be invaluable. Eloise processed his request, understanding dawning. That's why you invited me to dinner tonight. You wanted to establish me as part of the family dynamic before Vivian and her lawyers arrived. A flicker of respect crossed his face. You are as perceptive as Oliver. Mr. Harrison, she began carefully, I would do anything to protect those children, but I'm just the maid. Will my testimony really carry any weight against their mother? Just the maid? He repeated, something like anger flashing in his eyes. Ms. Jackson, you are the person who has raised my children for the past 5 years. You're the one who knows Oliver's nightmares are triggered by thunderstorms like tonight's. You're the one who understands that Emma needs her stuffed elephant, Ellie Jr., I believe she calls it, to fall asleep when she's upset. Eloise stared at Alexander, momentarily speechless. The fact that he knew such intimate details about his children's lives, details she had assumed he was oblivious to, caught her completely off guard. How do you? She began, unable to complete the question. Alexander's expression shifted, revealing a vulnerability she had never associated with the powerful CEO. I watch the security feeds, he admitted. When I'm traveling, in hotel rooms across the world, I watch my children through the cameras. I see them with you. The revelation sent a chill down Eloise's spine. You spy on your own children? I observe, he corrected, though without much conviction. It's how I stay connected when I can't be here physically. And you've been watching me? The thought made her uncomfortable, violated somehow. I've been watching you care for my children in ways I never learned how to, he said quietly. I've seen you handle Oliver's meltdowns over seemingly impossible math problems with more patience than I could ever muster. I've watched you teach Emma to embrace her curls instead of trying to straighten them like the other girls at her school. Eloise tried to process this new information, this strange window into a man she had thought she understood, the absent father, the cold businessman, the employer who barely acknowledged her existence. Now he was revealing himself as something far more complicated. Mr. Harrison, Alexander, he interrupted. After 5 years of watching you raise my children, I think you can call me by my first name. Alexander, she conceded, the name foreign on her tongue. Why are you telling me this now? He stood, moving to the rain-streaked window. Lightning illuminated his profile, casting half his face in stark relief against the darkness. Because Vivian is right about one thing. I have been an absent father. My work has consumed me, leaving little time for what truly matters. He turned back to face her. But that doesn't mean I don't love my children. It doesn't mean I'm willing to let them be taken halfway across the world by a woman who abandoned them once already. What exactly are you asking of me? Eloise questioned, though she already suspected the answer. I need you to help me fight for my children, Ms. Jackson. Not just with your testimony, but with your guidance. I need to learn what you know about them, their needs, their fears, their dreams. I need to become the father they deserve. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Eloise stood, smoothing down the unfamiliar fabric of the expensive dress she still wore. Your children need you to be present, Alexander. Not watching from a distance through cameras, but physically here. They crave your attention, your approval. Every time you walk through that door, their faces light up like it's Christmas morning. I know, he acknowledged, pain evident in his voice. And I want to change that. Starting now. Eloise considered him carefully. The custody hearing. When is it? 3 weeks from today. Vivian's lawyers are pushing for an expedited process. 3 weeks isn't much time to establish yourself as an involved parent after years of absence, she pointed out bluntly. No, he agreed. It isn't. But it's what we have. What I have. The use of we wasn't lost on Eloise. She thought of Emma and Oliver, their faces as they'd fallen asleep in their makeshift fort. vulnerable and trusting despite the chaos erupting around them. They deserved stability, love, a home with people who truly saw them. If Alexander Harrison was finally awakening to his responsibilities as a father, she had no right to stand in the way of that transformation. "All right," she said finally. "I'll help you. For the children." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you, Ms. Jackson." "Eloise," she corrected, a small smile touching her lips. "After 5 years of raising your children, I think you can call me by my first name." The unexpected echo of his own words brought a genuine smile to his face, the first real one she had ever seen from him. It transformed him completely, softening the hard edges of power and privilege into something almost approachable. "Thank you, Eloise," he said, her name carrying a weight and respect she had never heard from him before. A crash of thunder, followed by a small shriek from down the hall, interrupted the moment. Emma was awake. Without discussion, they both moved toward the door, parental instinct overriding any awkwardness of their new understanding. They found Emma sitting up in her fort, tears streaming down her face while Oliver tried to comfort her. "The thunder," Oliver explained unnecessarily as they entered. "It was a big one." Eloise moved automatically to Emma's side but paused, glancing at Alexander. This was his opportunity to step into his role as father. To her surprise, he seemed to understand, kneeling beside the fort instead. "Emma," he said gently, "it's just a storm. It can't hurt you in here." Emma looked at her father with wide, tear-filled eyes, clearly surprised by his presence. "Daddy, you're still here?" The simple question carried years of disappointment, of waking to find him gone on business, of expecting him for events he missed, of learning not to rely on his presence. Alexander's face reflected the pain of recognition. "Yes, I'm here," he assured her, reaching out tentatively to brush a curl from her forehead. "And I'm not going anywhere." Emma's lower lip trembled. "Promise?" "Promise," he said firmly. Oliver watched the exchange skeptically, years of broken promises evident in his guarded expression. Alexander noticed, turning to include his son. "I know I haven't been here for you both as much as I should have been," he admitted, the kind of vulnerable honesty Eloise had never expected from him. "But that's going to change." "Because Mom's trying to take us away?" Oliver asked perceptively. Alexander considered his son with newfound respect. That was the wake-up call, yes. "But the change is happening because it's long overdue, regardless of your mother's actions." Another crack of thunder made Emma jump. Alexander hesitated, then did something that shocked Eloise. He crawled into the blanket fort beside his children, his expensive suit incongruous against the princess-themed blankets. "When I was your age," he began, settling awkwardly beside them, "I was afraid of storms too." Emma's eyes widened with disbelief. "You were?" "Absolutely terrified," he confirmed. "My grandfather taught me to count the seconds between lightning and thunder to know how far away the storm was. Want to try?" As Alexander guided Emma through the counting exercise, Eloise backed quietly toward the door, feeling suddenly like an intruder on a private family moment. Before she could slip away, Oliver noticed. "Ellie, where are you going?" he called out. "I thought I'd let you have some time with your father," she explained gently. "But you always stay during storms," Emma protested, panic edging her voice. Alexander met Eloise's eyes over the children's heads. "Perhaps we could all stay," he suggested, his tone making it more of a request than an order. After a moment's hesitation, Eloise nodded, settling on the edge of the bed near the fort. "I'll be right here," she assured Emma. They remained that way through the worst of the storm, Alexander inside the fort with the children, telling stories from his own childhood they'd never heard before, while Eloise maintained her protective presence nearby. Gradually, Emma's fear subsided, replaced by drowsy contentment as she leaned against her father's arm. "You should try to sleep," Eloise finally suggested as the storm began to fade. "It's been a long day." Oliver nodded, already yawning despite his determination to stay alert. Emma was practically asleep already, her head nestled against her father's shoulder. Alexander looked down at his daughter, a mixture of tenderness and uncertainty on his face. It struck Eloise that for all his business acumen and power, he had no experience with this simplest of parental tasks, putting a child to bed. "Should I move her?" he whispered. "Carefully," Eloise nodded. "She's a light sleeper." With a gentleness that surprised her, Alexander lifted Emma and placed her on her bed, covering her with her favorite blanket, the one with stars that glowed in the dark. Oliver climbed out of the fort and got into his own sleeping spot beside his sister, clearly intent on maintaining his protective watch. "Good night, Professor," Alexander said softly, using Eloise's nickname for his son without realizing it. "Thank you for looking after your sister." Oliver's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected recognition. "That's my job," he replied seriously. "Mine too," Alexander acknowledged, "and I haven't been very good at it, but I'm learning." He bent down, and after a moment's hesitation, placed a kiss on Oliver's forehead, something Eloise had never seen him do before. Oliver didn't pull away, which she counted as progress. They left the room together, Alexander dimming the lights but leaving the door slightly ajar, just as Eloise always did. In the hallway, he ran a hand through his hair, disheveled now from the blanket fort. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For showing me how to be with them," he replied. "It doesn't come naturally to me the way it does to you." "It's not about natural talent," Eloise corrected gently. "It's about showing up, being present, listening." He nodded thoughtfully. "I have a lot to learn in 3 weeks." "Then we'd better get started," she said with unexpected determination. "Tomorrow morning you should join them for breakfast. Not with your phone or tablet, just you and them. Ask questions and really listen to the answers." "Breakfast," he repeated, as if memorizing a critical business strategy. "I can do that. And then we need to talk about your work schedule. The custody hearing isn't just about these 3 weeks. It's about demonstrating your long-term commitment to being an involved parent." Alexander's brow furrowed. "My position doesn't allow for conventional hours." "Then make it unconventional," Eloise challenged. "You're the CEO. Surely you can restructure meetings, delegate more, work remotely sometimes." He looked at her with newfound respect. "You don't mince words, do you? Not when it comes to those children," she replied unapologetically. A small smile touched his lips. "I can see why they adore you." His expression grew serious again. "We have our work cut out for us, Eloise. Vivian has resources, and her lawyers will paint me as an absent workaholic who delegated parenting to the staff. Then prove them wrong," she said simply. "Starting tomorrow." "Starting tonight," he corrected. "I'm not flying back to Tokyo as scheduled, I'm staying here." The declaration shouldn't have surprised her given everything that had happened, but somehow it did. Alexander Harrison altering his sacrosanct schedule was unheard of. "Good," was all she said. "The children will be happy to see you at breakfast." She turned to go, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the elegant dress, still standing in a hallway with a man who was technically her employer, but had somehow become something more complicated in the span of a single tumultuous evening. "Eloise," he called after her, his voice unusually hesitant. "There's something else you should know." She paused, turning back. "Yes?" "Vivian's lawyers will come after you," he warned. "They'll try to discredit you, suggest that your influence has been inappropriate or harmful. They'll dig into your background, your personal life, anything they can use." The warning sent a chill through her. "I have nothing to hide," she said, though a flicker of unease passed through her. Everyone had something, some pain, some mistake, some vulnerability. "I just want you to be prepared," Alexander said. "This won't be easy for any of us." "Few worthwhile things are," Eloise replied with quiet conviction. As she made her way back to her quarters in the staff wing, Eloise found herself replaying the evening's events. The disastrous dinner, Vivian's shocking announcement, the storm that had forced Alexander to finally connect with his children, their unexpected alliance in the face of a common threat. She changed out of the borrowed dress, carefully hanging it up, and slipped into her own comfortable pajamas. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a gentle rain that tapped against her window like a lullaby. Despite the exhaustion of the day, sleep eluded her as her mind raced with questions and concerns. What would Vivian's lawyers find if they dug into her past? Nothing scandalous, surely, but everyone had vulnerabilities. Her sister's struggles with addiction, the scholarship funds she sent monthly to her niece, the online classes she'd been taking, hoping to someday earn her degree. Would these normal human complexities somehow be twisted to portray her as unsuitable to care for Oliver and Emma? And then there was Alexander himself, the enigmatic man who had watched her through security cameras for years, learning about his children through her interactions with them. The thought still unsettled her, though she understood the impulse behind it. A parent separated from their children would grasp at any connection, any window into their lives. The most troubling question, however, was what would happen after the custody battle. If Alexander won, would he truly change? Or would he gradually slip back into his old patterns, leaving Eloise once again as the primary parent in all but name? And if he lost? The thought of Emma and Oliver being taken away, across an ocean, away from everything and everyone they loved, was unbearable. As Eloise clutched her grandmother's locket, centering herself with the familiar ritual. "One day at a time," she whispered, her grandmother's favorite saying. Just one day at a time. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For now the children were safe, sleeping under the same roof as both their father and the woman who had loved them as her own for 5 years. It would have to be enough. What none of them knew, not Eloise in her modest quarters, nor Alexander in his rarely used master suite, nor the children sleeping peacefully after the storm, was that Vivian Harrison had not left the grounds as they assumed. Her sleek black car had merely circled to the service entrance, where she now sat in quiet conversation with an unlikely ally, someone within the household who had their own reasons for wanting to see Alexander Harrison lose everything he valued most. The real storm, it seemed, was just beginning. Dawn broke over the Harrison estate, painting the manicured grounds in hues of gold and amber. Eloise woke earlier than usual, her mind still processing the previous night's revelations. She moved through her morning routine on autopilot, wondering if Alexander would actually keep his promise to join the children for breakfast. As she approached the kitchen, unexpected voices made her pause. Alexander was already there, awkwardly attempting to prepare something at the counter, while Patterson watched with barely concealed horror. "Sir, please allow me to," Patterson began. "I need to learn, Patterson," Alexander interrupted, determination evident in his voice. Eloise mentioned pancakes are Oliver's favorite. How difficult can it be? The answer was apparently very difficult, judging by the flour dusting Alexander's normally immaculate appearance and the charred smell emanating from the stove. Eloise cleared her throat, announcing her presence. Both men turned, Alexander looking almost sheepish, an expression she never thought she'd see on his face. "Good morning," she offered, fighting a smile. "Eloise," Alexander acknowledged, relief evident in his voice. "Perhaps you could advise?" She approached the chaotic scene, assessing the damage. "Pancakes are tricky," she said diplomatically. "The first few always go wrong." Patterson seized the opportunity to retreat. "I'll go wake the children," he announced, straightening his tie before making a hasty exit. Alone in the kitchen, Eloise and Alexander regarded each other awkwardly, their new alliance still unfamiliar territory. "You're really committed to this," she observed, beginning to clean up his cooking disaster. "I told you I would be," he replied, rolling up his sleeves to help, though I may have overestimated my culinary abilities. "Cooking can be learned," Eloise said, measuring fresh ingredients into a bowl. "The important thing is that you're here." Alexander watched her efficient movements carefully. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the bowl. She handed it to him. "Stir until just combined. Lumps are okay in pancake batter." As he followed her instructions, a comfortable silence fell between them, an unlikely partnership forming in the early morning light. The moment was interrupted by Emma's delighted squeal from the doorway. "Daddy, you're still here!" She launched herself at her father, nearly causing him to spill the batter. Alexander caught her with one arm, his face softening. "I promised, didn't I?" Oliver appeared behind his sister, his expression guarded but hopeful. "You're making breakfast?" he asked skeptically. "Attempting to," Alexander admitted, with professional supervision. The children exchanged glances, clearly trying to process this bizarre new reality. Their distant father in the kitchen, making pancakes, joking about his own shortcomings. "Can I help?" Emma asked, already reaching for the bowl. "Me too," Oliver added, not wanting to be left out. And so began the strangest breakfast preparation the Harrison kitchen had ever witnessed. Eloise guided them all, showing Alexander how to test if the griddle was hot enough, teaching Emma the perfect moment to flip a pancake, letting Oliver experiment with adding blueberries in precise patterns. By the time they sat down to eat, the kitchen was a disaster, but the table was laden with mostly edible pancakes and the sound of genuine laughter, a rare commodity in this house. "Is this really happening?" Oliver whispered to Eloise, when Alexander was distracted by Emma's elaborate story about her ballet recital. "It is," she confirmed quietly. "People can change, Professor. Sometimes they just need a reason." Oliver's eyes darted to his father. "You think he'll stay this way, even after the custody thing?" The perceptiveness of this 9-year-old never ceased to amaze her. "I hope so," she answered honestly. But either way, you and Emma are loved. Never doubt that. After breakfast, Alexander surprised them all again by announcing he needed to go into the city for meetings but would return for dinner. And, he added, looking directly at Oliver, I thought perhaps this weekend we might visit the Air and Space Museum. I understand they have a new exhibit on quantum computing that might interest you. Oliver's eyes widened. Really? You'd take me? Us, Alexander corrected. All of us. Eloise too, if she'd like to join. The invitation caught her off guard. I wouldn't want to intrude on family time. You are family, Emma declared with a child's simple certainty. Aren't you, Daddy? Alexander met Eloise's gaze over his daughter's head. Yes, he said after a moment, in all the ways that matter most. The statement hung in the air, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Eloise busied herself clearing dishes, emotions she couldn't name threatening to overwhelm her. After Alexander departed and the children were settled with their tutor, Eloise tackled her usual morning tasks, trying to process the shifting dynamics in the household. She was so distracted that she nearly collided with Patterson in the hallway outside the library. Miss Jackson, he said formally, though his usual composure seemed slightly off. A word, if I may. She followed him into the small study adjacent to the library, noting his unusual fidgeting. Is everything all right, Mr. Patterson? She asked. He closed the door carefully. I feel I should warn you, he began, his voice low. Mrs. Harrison did not leave the premises last night as we believed. Alarm prickled along Eloise's spine. What? Where is she? She departed early this morning, but not before having an extended conversation in the garden house with Ms. Reynolds. The information took a moment to register. Diana Reynolds, the children's former nanny, dismissed 3 years ago when Eloise was hired. The woman had seemed competent but cold, viewing the children as obligations rather than individuals. Oliver, in particular, had struggled under her rigid care. Why would Vivian meet with Diana? Eloise wondered aloud. She's been gone for years. Patterson's expression grew troubled. Ms. Reynolds did not leave on good terms, if you recall. She felt her dismissal was unjust. Memory clicked into place. The incident that had led to Diana's firing. She had harshly disciplined Oliver for a minor infraction, leaving the 6-year-old in tears. Eloise, newly hired as a housekeeper then, had witnessed the aftermath and reported it to Patterson, who had taken the unusual step of consulting Alexander directly. Diana had been dismissed the next day. You think she's helping Vivian? Eloise realized. Providing information to use against Alexander in the custody case. I believe so, Patterson confirmed grimly. And potentially against you as well, Ms. Jackson. Ms. Reynolds was most resentful of your relationship with the children. The warning settled heavily in Eloise's stomach. Diana Reynolds had worked in the Harrison household for over 4 years. She knew its rhythms, its secrets, its vulnerabilities. Thank you for telling me, she said, genuinely grateful for Patterson's loyalty. The house manager had always been formal but fair, putting the children's welfare above all else. There's more, Patterson continued reluctantly. Mrs. Harrison has requested copies of all security footage from the past year. Eloise's blood ran cold. Can she do that? Technically, yes. The divorce agreement gives her certain rights regarding household documentation. Patterson hesitated, including footage related to the children's care. The implications were clear. Vivian would comb through hours of footage looking for any moment that could be twisted to paint Eloise, or Alexander, in a negative light. We've done nothing wrong, Eloise said firmly, more to reassure herself than Patterson. Of course not, he agreed. But in legal matters, context can be manipulated. As Patterson departed, Eloise found herself standing alone in the study, surrounded by leather-bound books that had witnessed generations of Harrison family drama. The room suddenly felt oppressive, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She moved to the window seeking air only to freeze at the sight below. A sleek car was pulling up the circular driveway, not Alexander's usual driver but a rental. From it emerged an elegantly dressed woman who could only be Vivian Harrison, accompanied by a severe-looking man carrying a leather portfolio. They were back much sooner than expected, and Eloise had a sinking feeling about why. Her suspicion was confirmed moments later when Patterson appeared at the study door, his face grave. Mrs. Harrison has arrived with her attorney, Mr. Leibowitz, he informed her. They've requested a meeting with you immediately. The children are still with their tutor, Patterson assured her. I've instructed Ms. Chen to extend their lesson by an hour. Eloise nodded gratefully. Thank you, Patterson. He paused, uncharacteristic emotion crossing his face. Ms. Jackson, Eloise, I've served this family for 27 years. I've witnessed both the best and worst of the Harrison legacy. His formal demeanor softened slightly. Those children have flourished under your care in ways they never did before. Whatever happens in that meeting, remember that. The unexpected support strengthened her resolve. I will. In the formal sitting room, Vivian Harrison sat like a queen holding court, while her attorney arranged documents on an antique side table. They both looked up as Eloise entered, Vivian's perfectly painted lips curving in a smile that never reached her eyes. Ms. Jackson, she greeted, her tone honey-sweet with underlying venom. So good of you to join us. Mrs. Harrison, Eloise acknowledged, keeping her voice neutral. Mr. Leibowitz, how can I help you? The attorney, sharp-featured and calculating, gestured to a chair positioned directly across from them. Please sit. We have some matters to discuss regarding your employment here. Eloise remained standing. I believe any discussions about my employment should include Mr. Harrison. Alexander has been informed of our visit, Vivian said smoothly. This is merely a preliminary conversation. Something in her tone told Eloise that Alexander had been informed of nothing. She reluctantly took the offered seat, keeping her posture straight and composed. We'll be direct, Ms. Jackson, Leibowitz began, his voice clipped and efficient. Mrs. Harrison has concerns about the nature of your relationship with the Harrison children. My relationship is that of a caregiver, Eloise stated firmly. A caregiver who has overstepped her boundaries, Vivian interjected, allowing the children to call you Ellie, undermining parental authority, creating inappropriate emotional dependencies. Each accusation felt like a physical blow, but Eloise kept her expression neutral. I've always acted in the children's best interests. With Mr. Harrison's full knowledge and approval, Leibowitz withdrew a document from his portfolio. We have testimonials suggesting otherwise. Diana Reynolds, the children's former nanny, has provided a comprehensive statement about your methods. The threat was becoming clearer. They were building a case against her, trying to paint her as harmful to the children's development, or worse, trying to replace their mother. I'm curious, Ms. Jackson. Vivian leaned forward, her designer perfume wafting across the space between them. What exactly are your qualifications to raise my children? No formal education in child development? No degree, just, what? A warm smile and good intentions? The deliberate attempt to belittle her stung, but Eloise refused to be baited. My qualifications are 5 years of consistent care and love for Oliver and Emma, something they've needed desperately. Vivian's eyes flashed dangerously. Are you implying I've been a negligent mother? I'm stating a fact, Eloise replied evenly. You left when Emma was 2. You haven't called, visited, or written in 5 years. And now I'm prepared to make amends, Vivian countered. To give my children the stable 2-parent home they deserve. With Philippe Deneuve? Eloise asked before she could stop herself. The man currently under investigation for fraud? Vivian's composure cracked slightly, surprise and anger flashing across her perfect features. You've been researching me. Oliver has, Eloise corrected, realizing too late she might be revealing too much. He's very thorough when something concerns him. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal preparations, tense encounters, and surprisingly, moments of genuine connection. Alexander kept his word, restructuring his schedule to be present for breakfast every morning and dinner each night. He attended Emma's ballet practice, sat through Oliver's science presentations, and even learned to make passable mac and cheese, the children's favorite comfort food. The custody hearing loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Eloise prepared her testimony with Alexander's attorneys, while continuing to navigate the delicate balance of supporting both father and children through the tumultuous time. Vivian made several more appearances at the estate, each time leaving tension and tears in her wake. On the morning of the hearing, rain pattered against the windows of the Harrison mansion, echoing the somber mood inside. Eloise helped Emma into her navy dress, the same one she'd worn the night Vivian had dropped her bombshell, and gently smoothed Oliver's collar as he struggled with his tie. Will we have to talk to the judge? Emma asked, her voice small with worry. Yes, sweetheart, but just for a little while, Eloise assured her. Just tell the truth about how you feel. And then we'll know, Oliver pressed. Today? Probably not today, Eloise explained gently. These things take time, but soon. Alexander appeared in the doorway, impeccable in his courtroom suit but with shadows under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. It's time. he said softly. The children moved to his side, an unconscious display of the bond that had formed over the past weeks. Alexander placed a protective hand on each of their shoulders, then looked up at Eloise with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Whatever happens today," he said, his voice low enough that the children couldn't hear, "I want to thank you for everything." She simply nodded, not trusting her voice. The courthouse was an imposing granite structure in downtown Boston. Inside, they were directed to a private waiting room while final preparations were made. Eloise sat with the children while Alexander conferred with his legal team in hushed tones. "Ellie," Emma whispered, clutching her hand, "what if the judge makes us go with Mom?" Before Eloise could answer, the courtroom doors opened and Vivian swept in, elegant in cream-colored designer wear. Behind her followed not only her lawyer but also Diana Reynolds, whose smug expression sent a chill through Eloise. "My darlings," Vivian cooed, moving toward the children. "Mommy's going to make everything right today." Oliver stiffened, edging closer to Eloise. Emma simply stared, a mixture of confusion and longing on her young face. "Mrs. Harrison," Alexander's attorney intervened smoothly, "please respect the court's instructions about contact before the hearing." Vivian retreated, but not before casting a triumphant glance at Eloise. "Enjoy these last moments, Ms. Jackson. By this afternoon, my children will be beyond your influence." Before Eloise could respond, a court officer appeared. "The judge will see the children now." Privately, Emma's grip on Eloise's hand tightened painfully. "Can Ellie come?" "I'm afraid not," the officer explained kindly. "Just you and your brother." Oliver stood straighter, his 9-year-old shoulders bearing the weight of responsibility. "It's okay, Em. I'll be with you." As the children were led away, Alexander moved to Eloise's side. "They'll be fine," he said, though uncertainty laced his voice. "The judge is known for being fair with children. They're stronger than anyone gives them credit for," Eloise replied, watching until the doors closed behind them. The courtroom itself was smaller than Eloise had imagined, but no less intimidating. She sat behind Alexander at the plaintiff's table, while Vivian and her team occupied the opposite side. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, entered and proceedings began. Hours of testimony followed. Financial records, character witnesses, experts in child psychology. Alexander's legal team methodically presented evidence of his recent involvement and long-term financial support. Vivian's lawyers countered with years of his absences, countless missed school events, the security camera supervision that they painted as creepy rather than caring. Finally, it was Eloise's turn to testify. She took the stand, acutely aware of Vivian's icy stare and Diana Reynolds' barely concealed hostility in the gallery. "Ms. Jackson," Alexander's attorney began, "please describe your role in the Harrison household." Eloise took a deep breath. "I was hired as a housekeeper 5 years ago, but my responsibilities quickly expanded to caring for the children when their previous nanny left." "And in your observation, what is Mr. Harrison's relationship with his children?" "He loves them deeply," Eloise stated firmly. Though his work kept him physically absent, he always ensured they had everything they needed. And in recent weeks, he's become the father they've always needed. Present, engaged, learning who they truly are. Vivian's attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach aggressive from the start. "Ms. Jackson, what formal qualifications do you have for childcare?" "None beyond CPR certification," she admitted, "but 5 years of daily hands-on experience." "And isn't it true that you've deliberately fostered dependency, positioning yourself as a maternal figure to replace Mrs. Harrison?" "I've never tried to replace their mother," Eloise countered steadily. "I've simply loved them and been there for them when they needed someone." The questioning continued, increasingly hostile, attempting to paint her as manipulative, unqualified, inappropriate. Through it all, Eloise held firm to one truth. Her love for Emma and Oliver was genuine, and everything she had done had been for their well-being. Finally, the children were brought back in to hear closing arguments. They settled beside Eloise, Emma climbing immediately into her lap while Oliver pressed against her side. "What did you tell the judge?" she whispered. "The truth," Oliver replied simply, "that we want to stay home, with Dad, and you." As the attorneys delivered their final pleas, Emma fell asleep against Eloise's chest, exhausted by the emotion of the day. Oliver remained vigilant, his eyes darting between his parents, the judge, and the clock on the wall. When it was over, the judge announced she would review all testimony and evidence before making her ruling. Given the complexity of this case and the children's best interests, I'll deliver my decision tomorrow morning at 9. The night that followed was the longest of Eloise's life. Back at the mansion, she helped the children pack small overnight bags, a precaution against Vivian winning and demanding immediate custody. Alexander retreated to his office briefly, then surprised them by suggesting they all watch a movie together in the family room. It was there, huddled on the sofa with Emma curled against her side and Oliver sprawled on the floor, that Eloise realized how completely these children had become her heart. Whatever the judge decided, nothing could erase the love that had grown between them. Alexander caught her eye across the room, his expression mirroring her own emotional turmoil. In the dim light of the movie, with the children between them, they formed a tableau of what could be, what should be, a family bound not by blood or legal documents, but by something far more powerful. "Time for bed," Eloise announced when the movie ended. "Tomorrow's a big day." She tucked the children in together in Emma's room, another special exception to help them feel secure. After reading their favorite story, she kissed each forehead gently. "No matter what happens tomorrow," she whispered, "remember that you are loved. Always." In the hallway, she found Alexander waiting, his tie loosened, his expression unguarded. "They're asleep?" he asked. "Almost." She nodded. "They're exhausted." "As are you," he observed. "You should rest." Eloise smiled faintly. "I doubt any of us will sleep much tonight." Alexander stepped closer, the distance between employer and employee long since dissolved. "Eloise, there's something I need to say in case tomorrow doesn't go our way." The intensity in his voice made her heart quicken. "These past weeks have shown me what I've been missing, not just with the children, but in my life. You've taught me what family truly means." He paused, gathering courage. "If we win tomorrow, I want you to stay, not as staff, but as part of our family, in whatever capacity feels right to you." The implication hung in the air between them, too new and fragile to name directly. "And if we lose?" she asked softly. "Then I'll fight until they're home again," he promised, "and I'll still want you by my side." Morning arrived with gentle sunshine replacing the previous day's rain. The courtroom was more crowded than before, news of the high-profile custody battle having leaked to the press. Eloise sat with the children until the final moment, then moved to the gallery as instructed. The judge entered, her expression giving nothing away. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I've reached my decision in the matter of Harrison versus Harrison." Emma reached for Oliver's hand. Alexander sat perfectly still, a statue of controlled tension. Across the aisle, Vivian leaned forward eagerly. "While both parents clearly love their children," the judge continued, "custody must be awarded based on stability, consistency, and the children's best interests." She paused, surveying the courtroom. "The testimony that weighed most heavily in my decision came not from lawyers or experts, but from the children themselves." She focused on Emma and Oliver directly. "You both expressed remarkable clarity about where and with whom you feel safest. The court respects those feelings." Looking back at her papers, the judge delivered her ruling. Primary physical custody is awarded to Alexander Harrison, with Vivian Harrison granted visitation rights to be determined in mediation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Oliver's shoulders sagged with relief while Emma bounced in her seat. Alexander remained frozen for a moment, as if not quite believing what he'd heard. "Furthermore," the judge added, silencing the room, "this court recognizes the significant role Eloise Jackson has played in providing stability and nurturing care. Her continued presence in the children's lives is noted as a positive factor in this decision." As they exited the courthouse, Emma broke free and ran to Eloise, throwing herself into waiting arms. "We get to stay home, with you and Daddy." Oliver followed more sedately, but the relief on his face spoke volumes. "It's over," he said simply. Alexander approached last, emotion evident in his usually composed features. "Thank you," he said, the simple words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through. "Let's go home," Eloise suggested, her heart fuller than she ever thought possible. 1 month later, the Harrison estate had transformed. Alexander's home office now doubled as a science lab where he and Oliver conducted experiments on weekends. Emma's ballet recital photos claimed pride of place in the formal living room, and Eloise moved from the staff quarters to a suite near the children, her role evolving from employee to something family lawyers were still working to define legally. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 5, its deep chimes reverberating through the mansion. Eloise's eyes opened before her alarm could sound. 20 years of rising with the sun had programmed her body better than any device. But unlike before, she wasn't alone. Alexander stirred beside her, reaching for her hand in the soft morning light. "Another day," he whispered, echoing the words she had spoken to herself countless mornings. "Another day together," she corrected as the sound of little feet padded down the hallway toward their door. The billionaire CEO had finally discovered what truly mattered, and the maid who had raised his children with love had found that sometimes home isn't a place at all, but the people who see you, truly see you, and love you for exactly who you are. Support our channel. It's free. Like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories about kindness, dignity, and second chances.